Hello, my name is Stretch Hoff, and I'm an interviewer for the Cincinnati Library and Hamilton County Library with the Veterans Program. And today we have Herbert Peebles is here to tell us his story, and Dennis Daly is going to be our cameraman today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We'd like to start your story. This is your story. Let's start with way back in your childhood and where you were born. We'll take right up through high school, whatever, and how you got in the service, and we'll go from there.
Well, I was born in 1922, June 2nd to be exact. And at that time, I was living with my grandparents, and my folks were in the same house. We had a big house that Grandpa had built on a farm in New Jersey. But believe it, we raised tomatoes and took them to the commission house. So, I was sort of I was up the hill. I wasn't down in the city where most of the kids were from. And when I was young, I cannot remember how old I was, but this airplane flew low over the farm. And I looked at it and I said, you know, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I don't know whether I'd be able to make it, but it just looked interesting to me. You know, in an airplane, you're free, you go and fly where you want to go and so on. So as I got older, we moved out of my grandparents' house, and the folks had their own house. And I went to high school in Hawthorne, New Jersey, and then I went to high school in Hawthorne, the new high school they built. And I lived up on the hill, so I'd get on my bicycle and just coast right into school. And I had to push the bicycle back uphill the next day.
A little tougher going home.
I'd go home. So anyway, when I got near college, folks said, well, we think we can start you in college, whether we have enough money to pay for it, but let's see. My mother was very progressive. She says, if you want to fly, we're going to try to make it possible for you.
So is this like the early 30s or mid-30s?
This was, I was going to graduate from high school in 1940.
1940, okay.
That's the day that's when I would graduate from high school.
Okay.
So we decided at Park Sarah College in East St. Louis I'd read about, and I said, well, that's the closest one. It's still a 22-hour by train, but I can go there, we can get home. So they said, yeah, we're going to try to start you off. Well, there we did. We got up. I entered in September of 40. I entered Park Sarah College, and I started flying, taking flying lessons. So I went through that term all right, and I soloed in October, I think it was, 15th, somewhere right around there. And we had different airplanes we flew, different models, so it could give you a little more experience. And
were they single-engine planes and just smaller single-engine planes?
Yeah, they're all small single-engine airplanes. Yeah, the first one I flew, they said talking about feel. I said I don't feel anything. This thing, you just move the controls, But then they got in what's called a dart, which is like a little two side-by-side seat, and it had feel. I knew what they were talking about, And this thing went a little faster, and so I progressed through that first course, and I went in January trying the second semester. Unfortunately, my father never exercised, and he smoked. And he had to shovel the driveway, 200-foot driveway of snow in March when I wasn't there anymore. And he died that night because he never didn't. And I was sad about that, but my mother said, well, at least we'll use your insurance money to finish your college.
Oh, boy.
So that really, in a way, helped me out, because flying in those days was kind of expensive college, really.
Yeah.
Of course, today it wouldn't be expensive, according to but it was kind of, you got to pay for the gas and the maintenance and everything of all these airplanes they had to maintain.
And how long at a time do you go to that college to learn how to be a pilot then at that point?
Pardon?
How long are you in school?
Oh, it would be a 2-year course.
2-year course,
yeah.
Okay.
So I would get out in 42. Mm-hmm. So I got in, got all the ratings, and one of the things they had at that school, we were right at the airport, and they had old engines there, and they made you take them apart and put them back together. In order to graduate, you had to be besides whatever course you took, you had to be a mechanic. You had to be a licensed airplane mechanic, which I ended up being also, which helped me a lot because I could understand. I'll tell you a story about that later.
Now, was flying as much fun as you thought it was going to be when you
Yeah,
were a little kid?
and of course I was flying at the time.
Yeah.
And I got up and I finished all the courses in the September of '42, and I went to American Airlines for an interview, and they were interested in me because I had more flight time than they could find with anybody that was free, you know. They could not take me in their course for a couple of months; they were full. So the draft board says, "We're going to get you." So I'm saying, "Well, I got to do something." So I took a job. My Parks Air College was opening up different schools around just for teaching Army primary. So I signed on for that, and they sent me to Tuscaloosa, Alabama for a flight check. And here's Stearman's they had down there, which I had been flying in college. Well, I could do acrobatics.
You can take it apart and put it together.
Like the guy that was checking me. In fact, I think I could do better acrobatics than he could, you know. But anyway, I passed the check there, and then they said, well, we got to open up a new base in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And that's where you're going to be. So that's where I ended up, Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
You're about, what, 20 years old then?
I'm 20 years old, yeah. Okay. And I'm in a college town. I had a room at a house where the widower had a son in college and a son in high school. So that was nice. They sort of introduced me to different people around. And I was enjoying myself teaching. And of course, the cadets used to have parties where they invite the cadets. As soon as they found out that one of the girls was going with an instructor, they wouldn't have anything to do with her. Poor girl. Yeah. But anyway, this college fellow that I lived with, he said, Rocky is my nickname.
Now, where'd you get that?
Well, Peebles, it got to be Pebbles, and then it got to be Rocks. Yeah. When I went to college, I told her it was Rocky. That was simple. And everybody in Cape Girardeau, or even in Cincinnati, I think, knows it now. But anyway, I said, yeah, I'll take a blind date. You know, meet some more of the girls at college. And up shows this beautiful brunette, you know. And we went out on a date. She wasn't too happy because of going to those shows she'd already seen, and she don't like blind dates, I found out. But then we went dancing, and I can dance. But big band dancing, which I had learned in high school. And so we got along good. And then she moved to St. Louis for a while, and I would get a weekend off. I'd go up to St. Louis and see her. When she moved to Chicago, there was no way I'd get from Cape Girardeau to Chicago and back there to be on duty on Monday morning. So
you are in the Army at this point?
No, I'm not. I am not. I'm a civilian.
Okay.
We didn't have to go on. We were, later on they put us in the Army Reserve, enlisted reserve. That way they could keep the draft boards off our back. Okay. So anyway, that went on for about a year and a half. And they said, well, now we can release some of you guys now for other jobs because the war was, they had so many pilots training, they were doing good. So I said, I'd like a release. So I went to Louisville, and Consolidated VOT was modifying B-24s at that time. And they said, yeah, we need another co-pilot. So I got the experience, and the boss gave me some experience in a multi-engine. He gave me some check rides and so on. And I was doing pretty good. I had an instrument rating, of course, and instructor's rating and all that. So I did pretty good at that. And then the boss calls me in one day and says, look, at your age, there's no way I can hold you here. These 39-year-old guys I got, 40-year-olds, they're working here. He said, I can hold them, but as soon as they find out your age, they're going to want you. So you ought to do something. So I called Cincinnati, head of the Air Transport Command for the Army. And I told them who I was, and I had B-24 experience. Not too many people come off with B-24 experience. And it also had as I said, I had a mechanic's license, so I know a lot about airplanes, insides of them. So anyway, they said, oh, we'd like to have you, but you have to report to Long Beach, California. It's the only openings we have right now. It cost me $97 to go to California to get in on active duty. But I got out there, and then they said, oh, well, all these instructors coming out of the training program, we want to give them a little more experience. I already had an instrument rating, but they sent me to instrument school anyway. And I sat in the back end of that BT down in Deming, New Mexico, and got hotter than Hades, you know, and flying instruments. And I was so sick from all the shots the Army had given me that I couldn't go use the new instrument, all the new gyros the Army had. I didn't have any gyros in my airplanes when I got instruments in college. So I got finished the instrument check, and the guy says, well, you passed it, but you should have done better than that. I said, yes, sir, I should have. But I got off the airplane, and I was sicker than a dog. Really? And so I got through that, and then we went to multi-engine, and we went down to Douglas, Arizona. That's another hellhole.
Places
across from Mexico. Because Mexico didn't interest me too much, so I went over there once, and I said, this isn't really for me. But anyway, we had multi-engine. Well, they said, you're going to fly the 18-9s. Well, they wouldn't let the cadets fly the 18-9s because you may reach in there and pull a bolt, and the bolt may come out. You had to be a little more sharper than that. Yeah. But anyway, we did that, and they were conventional gears. It's not everything is tricycle gear these days, but all the big ships are. And the older guys had trouble with that because when you touch down with two wheels, don't pull back on the stick a little bit because you're going to fly again. You got to go forward on it. Well, I couldn't. And they said, Peebles, you take Perweiler up there and teach him how to land this thing, because I had the most instructing experience. So I did. We bounced all over Southern California and Arizona and all over the place. And finally, I got him to where he could land the airplane. Well, then they said, well, now they gave us a commission, and back to Long Beach where I had started out. And they said, you want to go to where do you want to station? Here's the list. And I said, Palm Springs, man. That's where I want to be.
Is that right?
And this is the fall of the year, and I'm going to be here in the winter. Yeah. And Hollywood comes to. So I said, man, for a young guy, it's the best place in the world to be. So anyway. I was there for a while, ferrying airplanes. They said, take this one to so-and-so, take this one to so-and-so. They said, no, you're going.
Actually an Air Force base right there in Palm Springs?
Yeah, it was a little, and so they said, we're going to transfer you to Wilmington, North Carolina. Or no, to Wilmington, Delaware, I'm sorry. And I said, I don't want to go there. I said, well, that's your home. I said, well, New Jersey was my home, but I have a sister and an aunt that may be in that area. But I said, oh, you're going to go anyway. I said, I got a car. What do I do? 200 miles a day to drive across the country. I said, well, that ain't bad. So I said, okay, well, if I have to go. So, but I was a little hesitant. I went to the transportation officer, and I said, Captain, right on the bottom of these orders, the day I'm supposed to report to Wilmington, Delaware, because this is kind of an oddball thing. You may agree with 200 miles a day, somebody else may agree with 300 miles a day or something. So they did. I said, this will save my fanny when I get to Wilmington if they question me. So anyway, one thing I forgot, when I was in Deming, New Mexico, and all this hot weather under instruments, from my girlfriend, I got a Dear John letter. I said, oh, that isn't exactly what I needed. But anyway, when I got the orders, you're going to Wilmington, here's your orders, but they weren't effective for 2 days. I hopped on a military airplane and flew to Dallas, which I wasn't supposed to do, but in the Army you got away with a lot of stuff. And then I couldn't get out of Dallas, so I took a train to St. Louis. And when I got to St. Louis, Chicago, where my girlfriend was, in Chicago, 100 miles up there, and 100 miles to Cape Girardeau, where I had been, and of course I met a lot of people down there. I called her up, and she said, oh, come up and see me. Well, I don't know, she kind of dropped me, so I don't know, but I'll go up and see her. So we met up there, and I was there for a week, but then we went dancing. And I said, I can't lose her. There's no way I can go overseas, and I don't want to get married before I go. So I talked her into announcing our engagement that Christmas. I was talking like a Dutch uncle that week to talk her into it. So then I went to the East Coast, and my sister was staying at her in-laws' Staten Island house. So I went there and stayed there a while. And I said, well, I need to take my car she had, but anyway, to get me to Wilmington, Delaware on time. And then I'll bring the car back to you, because I probably won't need it just on a station in Wilmington. So at least I got down there, and they said, oh, we need you right away. You got to check in, and we got a flight for you. They made me check into the base, and they had a flight. They put me on a train, sent me to Wilmington, North Carolina, to pick up an airplane with another pilot who was qualified in the airplane. And we got down there, and we took off, and we flew to Wilmington, South Carolina, because you can only fly in the daytime and the daylight. You couldn't fly in the other, so we landed there. So then I went to a hotel, and the next morning, and I woke up, I was sicker than a dog. And I called the flight surgeon. He says, I'll send a staff car for you. So they sent a staff car in for me, and they took me back out there, and examined me. He said, you better stay overnight. This is the Army. I just follow orders. So I walked back to the officers who were the nurses on the phone. Are you Peebles? I said, yes. You got it. What? Acute appendicitis.
Oh, gee.
So the doctor comes in and said, well, we freeze it maybe, but we ought to take it out. I said, take it out, doc. I figured I wasn't going to know anything about this. Well, the next, they scheduled it as quick as they could, and they gave me a local. Well, I thought I was going to, they'd knock me out and I wouldn't know anything. Well, I felt everything going on. Yeah. And they said, where did you learn that language? I said, I've been in the Army a month. So anyway,
now, what's your job at Wilmington? Where do you go?
Well, I was assigned to ferrying airplanes.
Okay.
Whatever I was qualified in, see.
Okay.
But I wasn't qualified in.
Repositioning airplanes around the country?
Yeah, well, they wanted the way I got into, I knew C-47s were made in Oklahoma City. So if I could get there, and I'm qualified as C-47, I could get a co-pilot and go somewhere and deliver it somewhere. So, so I got him to talk him into checking me out at night in the C-47 when I handed the ground school certificate to him. If the guy said, if you had ground school, we have it, you could check out. Here it is. I had a degree from college, but they didn't care about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, they checked me out at night, and they said, well, here, you're a co-pilot on this airplane to Savannah, Georgia, B-26 or something. So I flew down there, and they didn't say what I was supposed to do after that, but they'd given me a little coupon book, which said you can go anywhere in the country you want to do on the airlines, and you have high priority except the president's cabinet, the only one that can kick you off the airline.
Wow, that's really high.
So I just wrote me a ticket for Oklahoma City. And I went to Dallas. I said, I need a co-pilot. Well, here's a guy. I said, give me a young fellow who wants to fly, because I'm going to fly if I can, you know. So we went up to Oklahoma City and handed him in, and I'm qualified on C-47s. Take this one to Fort Wayne, Indiana. So that's what we did. Had fun going to Fort Wayne. Came back. And then the next one was to Cheyenne, Wyoming, I believe. And it was getting December about that time. And I landed at Cheyenne, and that's all my orders read. Deliver this airplane to Cheyenne. I said, sign here. Oh, no, I don't want to sign here. This is a Russian airplane. This has got to go to Alaska. In December? Not me. I don't want to go to Alaska in December. And I talked him out of it. And so he signed the thing, and I was released to go where I wanted. I could write me another ticket to anywhere I wanted to go. Just write it on that thing and go there. Back to Oklahoma City. But through Dallas, I lost my co-pilot, got another one. And I think I don't forget where I took that one. I had on Park, Florida, or someplace. And
so how long were you doing this job?
And I wouldn't come back to Wilmington for a month. I needed new clothes. They said, where have you been? I said, oh, come on, fellas. You know, you get a letter from me. I deliver an airplane almost every other day. I said, that's more than anybody else is doing. Yeah, well, you're right there. There's nobody else doing that. So I got by with that, but then they sent me out again and said, well, you got to come back from this flight because you're going overseas. So whatever I went, I don't remember where I went. I did come back. So then they got the program going where I'm sent to free for a week, I believe, and then to Nashville, I think it was, for staging and so on.
Now, when was this? What year was this? 1942? Was this when you were there? Okay. So now you're set to go overseas. Is that what they're doing?
Yeah. Well, now 42 is when I started flight instruction. And I was there a year and a half, so I was about 40. I was about 21, 22 at that time.
Okay.
And so anyway, they sent me this overseas program. And of course, being a young GI with all the rest of them, I figured out how to get off the base and how to get back on it, even though I wasn't supposed to. But But we did that. And then we went to such things as West Palm Beach, Florida. That's another staging area. And then you jump to South America. And I'm a passenger on a C-46 going to India, and we're flying over the Amazon jungle, and I look out there and I say, oh my God, I don't want to jump out if anything happens here.
Yeah.
So I got my jungle vest on and read the book. And we made it to Natal, Brazil. So we're having a good time in Natal, Brazil. A couple of nights we're there. Dance halls are there and all this. We're having fun. And they said, okay, you got your trip's scheduled to go out in the morning to Ascension Island. That's a little island out in the South Atlantic. But they had a refueling stop. But he said the wind is so strong, it's optional whether you go or not. Well, the captain decides he's going to go. I said, Captain, you get, I don't know how many guys, maybe 15 or 20 guys in the back end. Said, we all got loaded 45s on our hip, and if you don't make Ascension Island because that wind's too strong, you may not be a happy life. But we made Ascension Island, fueled up and hopped off for Africa. And we made it into the Gold Coast, I think it was, someplace, and then we went across Africa in a couple of overnight stops. And the captain calls me up, my pilot, and he said, hey, you're the most experienced other pilot on this airplane. He said, I want to take some pictures out of the back hatch. I want you to get me down in a village and maybe a lake where we could get some wild animals. Well, I took him right down to the center of the village. He said, I didn't want to get that close. I said, you want a good picture, didn't you, Captain? So we finally got over I think I had Easter dinner in Aden, Arabia, I believe it was, on the way over there. With some fruits I'd never seen before, things, because the things that we see today now we know about, but in those days we didn't ship over here. Yeah. So we finally got to Karachi, and then I was sent from Karachi, India, to Barrackpur. And then they got there and said, no, we're not going to hold you here. You're going up to Kurmatola, which is a little base they put up in the Assam Valley, near. And so I said, okay, so we were set up there. And we had B-24 converted to tankers, which are C-109s. And then we had C-54s. So first trip over to C-54, I'm sent out as a co-pilot for familiarization. So we go over, and then we go over and we go in and have our eggs in China, which everybody did, if the weather was good. But when we went into, it goes to Kunming, and we're going into Kunming, and we had the weirdest instrument approach I'd ever had been on. But there was the airport, and all it was ADFs. No precision to it. It's just a matter you had to try to follow this diagram and hope. And a weird approach. So anyway, there was Kunming Airport. So we came back, and the next trip is mine, and I'm over there. I said, I'm going to shoot this whole approach in the daytime where I can see. Well, you're going towards one mountain, and they say, okay, now turn 180 degrees and keep your airspeed at a certain thing and go back this heading for so many minutes, and then you stop and you turn 90 degrees and you let down a little more, and there should be an airport there.
So well, you're between all the mountains.
You're going between the mountains. And that's what I did the time before, but I didn't know I couldn't see anything. So anyway, there was Kunming Airport, right where it should be. So we had a few trips like that, and
now at this time, are you doing this the Burma route at this time?
We're really lower than what all the trouble was with the high altitude. We didn't have to go that high.
Okay.
We were a little lower level, we call it. But we go back and forth a number of times. And
what were you hauling? What was your cargo at that time?
Pardon?
What were you hauling in the airplanes at that time?
Well, lots of things, mostly, but mainly the 54s. They put about, I think it was 30 drums of high test fuel, 100 octane high test fuel, drums in the back end of this thing. If you miss, you're gonna have a hell of a fire. Biggest fire India ever had, I'll tell you. So one night I took off, and this airplane just didn't come off the ground like it should. I'd been taking off enough that I could feel what it was going to do. And I said, there's something wrong, and I can't stop because I've gone beyond speed. You got to go. So I got it off the ground and I got it above the trees, and the lights are flashing on the tops of the trees. That's how close we were. And I called the engineer up after he got up. I said, "What's the load on this airplane?" He hands me the manifest. I said, "Hell, I've seen the manifest. That isn't right, because this airplane didn't come off the ground like it should." He said, "Well, I put a couple extra gallons, 100 gallons on for my kids and for my wife." I said, "Son, you damn near killed us all."
Now are you based in India right now?
I was based in India,
Okay.
yeah. I got up to Coimbatore and based there.
Yeah.
And so I got it up the ground. I got it happy. I said, but, I realized how heavy that thing was, and I barely got it off the ground. But all by the numbers, did exactly like it's supposed to be, and it did. It worked. So anyway, I said, "Son, he was new from the States. Just had come over, new engineer. Wasn't really up." He thought, "Oh, well, a couple extra 100 gallons will help out." Help out. We damn near ended up in the trees, but.
And are you flying these into China?
Yeah, we're going to China, and all my runs were into China. Yeah.
Now, are there? You mentioned that you were flying low, so some of them were flying above the mountains.
Well, we were farther down toward Burma, and the routes were lower. We could stay lower. We didn't have to go as high as they had to in the original days. Yeah.
And what year is this now? You started doing that?
Well, I got over there in I got my commission in '44. And I was over there in the first part of 45.
Okay.
Yeah. And that went on for a while. Of course, the war ended then, after a while. But I'd flown over there, and then we started ferrying troops into Shanghai. Well, we had a stage off Luqiao, it's called, over in China, where we could refuel and take them in. And we got 60 Chinamen in the back end of this 54.
So
And
the
we
troops
landed
are
there.
Chinese, you're ferrying the troops of China.
Yeah, now we're ferrying troops to occupy. And we land in Shanghai. The Japanese are still armed. It's still their territory, the way of speaking. Theoretically, the war in it. And my engineer got a little excited, They didn't like this idea. I said, "Wait a minute, son. Don't start it now. We got 60 Chinamen in the back end of this airplane. We can't talk to them."
Yeah.
And the Japanese still have the guns. We haven't got about a 45 on our hip, a couple of us. And that's what I said, "Don't get too excited. Let's do our duty, refuel the airplane, and go back home." So that's what we did.
And the Japanese let you alone, didn't they?
Oh, the Japanese were nice to us. The one I talked to graduated from the University of California. So anyway, we fared in and out of Shanghai, ferrying troops in. Most every airplane that went in there had engine trouble. I didn't have it because I couldn't legally say I did. But they made it. They wanted to stay in Shanghai overnight. Well, all those, the food there was terrific, and lots of Russian girls there. They were abundant part of it.
Were they good dancers?
Huh?
Were they good dancers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of them were dancers. It's amazing how fun at that time. Even when I got in Bangkok, Thailand. I was over there a couple of nights. Well, I'll tell you, that'll come up in a minute. But anyway.
So tell us more about the cargo. You mentioned you had fuel you were taking, and
some of the airplanes were C-46s and 47s didn't go across the hump. They just did interior stuff. And they had piano for Madame Chiang Kai-shek's piano, as somebody told me one time. And then a lot of her clothes she needed. And sometimes they had an engine trouble, they threw those out. They'd throw out anything to lighten the airplane when they lost an engine, But I didn't have any of those particular troubles.
How many missions did you fly?
I can't remember the number, but about every third day you had a trip over and back. But we had a lot of different cargoes, but mostly mine was gasoline can, barrels, and then the B-24 tankers had tanks in there, and you had to pump it out, dump it in a tank out in China. And I wanted to go to Kunming, and I couldn't get into Kunming, too much traffic, so they said, "Go to Shin-Tu." So I went up to Shin-Tu, and I said, "Now I'm low on fuel. I got to save one of those tanks in the bomb bay to get home on." So we did that. I saved one tank, and we started back home. And and the engineer transfer all that fuel out of the Bombay tanks into the main tank so we can go on. He said, yes, sir. Well, he said he was doing that, but he didn't talk to me much about it. All of a sudden, number 4, fuel pressure drops to 0. Engineer, come here. Why is that? Well, sir, I'm trying to transfer the fuel out of the Bombay tank, but I don't think it's working. I says, now you tell me. But we just passed an airport, an old U.S. base, so I swung around and landed there, and there was fuel available. And I said, well, you damn near, I came close to having a dead 4-engine glider. And it'd been a little hard to figure out, you know, where you're going to put this B-24 with no engines.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised that you were never attacked by the Japanese.
Well,
did you have fighter protection of some
well,
sort?
no. We were so far in there, and I mean, the Japanese would push back quite a bit. So, but now, my first trip over the hump, I'm coming back, and it's my first trip as I was a co-pilot to get a familiarization. I said, what's a 3-bullet alert? And he said, that's Japanese fighters in the vicinity. I said, we're over Bommel right now, and Bommel just went to a 3-bullet alert. Theoretically, there's a Japanese fighter around here, and what do we got, a 45 on the hip, and we got to open the window to shoot it. You know? That ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we took that C-54 and took it down on the deck and hitch hubbed it all the way back there. They can't find you down low too easily.
So, but this was a continuous operation of
Yeah,
supplying.
just day after day.
And were you far enough behind the lines is that why you weren't
That
attacked?
wasn't a problem.
Okay.
Now, as soon as the war ended, though, I got to China, everybody's got a gun. And I never saw any guns in the bases we went to. They said the war's just starting. That's when the communists started taking over the place.
Okay.
And they said, now, if we signal you, get that airplane out of here. They didn't want that to happen. So, well, that would have been a little exciting for a while.
Yeah.
But to be sure, the engineer had me excited when all of a sudden 4 pressure drops to 0, and he tells me that he hadn't transferred any fuel out of the Bombay. The valve was closed so tight he thought it was on all the way or something like I don't know what. But anyway, I got it on the ground, but we were too low to bail out, too late to bail out. You know, we couldn't do anything really. But I got it on the ground. We got fuel. We got back to China. All right. One night coming back into China, it was raining so hard. We couldn't see ahead of us. You know, windshield wipers are going, but you can't really see anything.
Yeah.
And we had an approach where we came over the fix, an ADF approach, and put it in a timed turn. Now this is a timed turn. Got to be at a certain rate, got to be a certain many minutes. And you rolled it in, and then when you did 180, your airport should be right there. Well, the first time around, they'd already lost 2 airplanes that night. They put them on autopilot, bailed out of them, and sent them to the Indian Ocean. And I said, I don't want to lose an airplane. I'm not inclined that way. So anyway, I shot one. I was on the right side of the runway. I shot the next one. I was a little bit on the left side of the runway. I said, now if I could judge this next one. And I did find a runway, but I was partway down it. Well, it was too late then. I didn't have any fuel to go around again. So I took it and put it on the runway, slammed on the brakes, and it slid off into the mud at the end. And I said, I called Towers, ground control, it's your airplane. Do what you want with it. I brought it back for you. So, but they'd already lost 2 that night because they couldn't get, it was raining so hard you can't see in front. You can see the airport off the side, but when you turn like this, it's the same thing. Can't see out the front.
I was reading that really early on, a lot of airplanes were lost, a lot of pilots were lost, and
Oh, when they were at high altitudes.
part of it was they couldn't fly over the Himalayas; they just couldn't get up that high. But you were down in the lower levels, so you were.
Yeah, I was a little lower, and actually, New Year's of '46, because the war was ended, we lost some airplanes with GIs taking them back to the coast to get on a ship to go home, and they figured out that they were fairly new pilots. And they wanted to see the Himalaya mountains, so they flew north, of course, and ran into the damn things. So I was in an officers' club on New Year's Eve, and they said, Peebles, you're the only Sabre one here, and you got a flight in the morning. A captain out of Washington was authorized an air C-47. He went up into the Bengal Valley, and then he had to go back to Calcutta, and then he went down to Burma, and then we went down to Thailand, Bangkok, Thailand, and then we went out to Saigon, French Indochina in those days, back to Thailand, and out to Singapore, Singapore, and then we had to go out to Sumatra the next day, and they said, look, you're blonde. Keep your uniform hat on in Sumatra. That was a Dutch possession. They didn't like the Dutch, and they may shoot you thinking you're blonde, think you're a Dutchman. I said, oh, thanks a lot. I like these places. Well, anyway, we got out of there and got back to Singapore, and then I brought him back to Bangkok, Thailand, and they'd already set up a shuttle all the way from Calcutta to Tokyo. I was going to Tokyo, I thought, but I didn't. The captain said, I'll get on the shuttle. I don't really need the airplane in Tokyo. Oh, nuts. I want to go there. So anyway, he said, fellas, don't stay here too long before you go back to Calcutta. So we went, stayed a couple of days, and we went back to Calcutta.
So when the war was over...
The war was over at that time, yeah.
You were still doing the shuttles.
These were just special missions. There were a lot of special missions came up in those days. And when I was flying C-54s and 109s, on my days off, I'd go down to operations. You got a 47 going anywhere? Yeah, we got a generator for Burma. You want to take it down there? Yeah, I'll take it down there. And then the guys, they said they need a pilot for jungle camp. We went and landed on the beach in Burma, on the beach, and they went to jungle camp for R&R, rest and recreation. Yeah. And they said, Peebles, why don't you stay with us overnight? I said, I heard about the tiger walking to the barrack, to the place where you sleep. I said, I don't want anything to do with staying overnight down here. The story goes, the tiger, the old tiger, looking, and he walks through the barracks, and he got the mosquito netting under the guys in the bed there, and he's touching this mosquito net. He can't figure out why he can't reach out, you know. Uh-huh. And the guy wakes up, and he is so scared he can't even make a sound. And I said, you want me to stay there? No way. Yeah. I'll fly you in, I'll fly you out, but I will not stay. Uh-huh. So that worked out all right.
So where were you when the war with Japan was over, after the...
Well, that's when the war with Japan was over.
Okay, talking about that war.
46 was the first.
Yeah.
That was it ended in September, October, whenever it was.
Uh-huh.
And as I said, I was in the officers club, and that special mission came up, and I got it. Mm-hmm. But as of the New Year's Day of 46, they said there were 8 pilots that could qualify as captain. The rest they weren't going to let do it because they were flying into the Himalayan mountains. They're losing these airplanes. Mm-hmm. But all I wanted to do was see the Himalayan mountains. I know my roommate at college was at a different base than I was. And he filled that airplane up with fuel and with oxygen and circled Mount Everest.
Oh my God!
Which you weren't supposed to do.
Yeah.
But it was an airplane that they had to slow time the engine, put some time on it, and make sure everything's working fine. So he flew up and got beautiful pictures about it, Mount Everest. But he was scared to turn them into the Life magazine because they still may get him, you know.
Yeah.
But we did, you know, we were all young. We were all in our early 20s, and who cared? You had a war going on. Something else may happen.
Sounded like you had a lot of freedom in what you were going to do.
Oh, yeah.
In your job.
When you take off an airplane, you pull a gear out from under it, you're in charge of that. That's your responsibility, you know, the captain, whoever's the captain's on it. And you've got to, you know, what you want to do, you make your decisions. Because when I got back, I knew they'd lost 2 airplanes that night, but I thought, I think I could get in and see, you know. But it was raining so hard, I really could not see ahead. So I shot the 2 approaches and missed. And I said, we don't make it now, fellas. It's up and bail out, because that's all we got to do. But we made it.
Good. So this is in 1946?
This would be 46, yes.
Okay. Now what in your...
into 45, first part of 46.
So what, tell me about the rest of your career then. After.
All right, well, I got a C-54, assigned to a C-54 to take troops back to the States. Mm-hmm. And we left, I don't remember the dates anymore, but but I think the first part of February, somewhere in there. And so we got a load of passengers in the back end. We got passengers now instead of cargo, you know, and we're taking them to all the way to the States. They, the way the order seemed to read, I wasn't taking them to Karachi to put them on a boat and send them home. So it was working pretty good. And I even now Baghdad, everybody knows Baghdad, and I've even refueled there. And then I flew over and I said, "Hey, everybody want to see Bethlehem?" Yeah. So I circled Bethlehem. Got into Cairo, and here's a big sign on the board: "Do not circle Bethlehem." well, if I end up in jail, that'll be it. But we did things like that. Yeah. And then we flew over to, I think, Casablanca for the night across Africa, and we went out to the restaurant, and the French didn't like the Americans anyway, and I've always had trouble with them. And so I said, "Hey, do you know fellas know how to sing Alouette, just a plumeray, you know, you learn somewhere in school?" And he said, "Yeah." So we sang that, and then the French were our friends from then on.
Is that right? Oh, that's great.
We all got talking to each other. And
so how long did the trip take to get them back to the U.S.?
Geez, 1, 2, 3, 4. About a little over a week, yeah. Because then we went down to the Gold Coast, and then we jumped all the way to South America.
Okay.
We didn't go into Ascension Island because we had a C-54. We had more fuel on board. Yeah. 46 couldn't make it. So we went back to Natal, Brazil, and then on up to British Guiana or something. It was refueled. Then hopped to West Palm Beach, Florida. You know.
Okay. Then what after that? When were you discharged from the service?
Well, I got out of it in I think March of '46, or 1st of April, and we got to West Palm Beach, and there wasn't any air transportation available. I said, "Well, give me a 54, and I'll take them anywhere they want to go." He said, "Well, you can't fly in the States. I've been flying all over the world. They wouldn't let me fly in the States." I said, "All right." I got all the civilian ratings and everything. Yeah. But anyway, I took the train to New York.
And how old were you at that point? You were like 24?
Well, 46, I would be
24.
20, let's see, I was born 22, so that would be 24. I guess I got up to 24 that year, but I was married by that time.
Oh, you were? When did
that
happen?
Yeah, well, I got out of service in about, I think, end of March, or during March of 46. And I got married in April of 46.
The girl from Chicago?
Yeah.
All right.
The girl that jilted me, and I talked her into it. Uh-huh. And I had her for 50 years, so we had a nice marriage.
Great.
And
so now, what did you do after the service? Did you?
Well, now after service, we moved to Carbondale, Illinois. We got the airport there. We took over the maintenance part at the airport, little airport. Mm-hmm. And then later on, we took over the flying part of it, and I took charge of that. Of course, I was the instructor. And we started teaching people how to fly on the GI Bill. And then they built a new airport, and we moved to the new airport and took charge of running that. It was paved runways and everything between Murfreesboro and Carbondale, Illinois. Well, that went on till, let's see, I was a reserve, and then I joined the National Guard Infantry. The reason I did that, hoping to get an air unit into our airport, Air National Guard. But it didn't happen to work that way. But so at that time, I was in the National Guard, and I went to Homestead, Florida, to a special school to get an airline transport rating. That's the highest rating on pilot licenses. And when I left, the National Guard unit I was in was going to be called up. So I went to the general, which was a friend of mine, and told him, "So I'll get you." My resignation had been in the mill, but it had never gone through. So finally he said, I'll take care of that. So I got out of the National Guard before it was called up.
Yeah.
I've been in the infantry. But all the officers said, if you get in, you're my pilot, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I got out of that, so. And then we ran the airport there for a few years. And then, let's see, in 1953, P&G needed an extra pilot because one quit. They called me if I could fly for a week, so I come over and flew for P&G for a week, and I was qualified in their airplanes. And they liked me, and one of their pilots wanted to go back to Detroit, so they offered me a job. So I brought my wife over, and we had interviewed, and I passed the physical and so on, and they offered me a job, so that's when I took a job with Procter & Gamble.
Oh, yeah.
I came on my birthday in June of 53, I guess it was, yeah. I'm losing track of years here.
You're doing a great job of recall. That's amazing.
And so we did that, and I went over to P&G and worked for them. And then I stayed there until I was 60 years old, which was 82.
So you were there almost
29 years.
29 years, wow.
And so I flew the C-47s they had, and then they went to Gulfstream 1s, turboprops. Well, they have these two damn turboprop engines, one on either, no matter which side you flew. And it ruined my hearing. It ruined a lot of people, the guys' hearing. That damn prop making all that noise out there. Well, then we go into the jets, so I threw my passport on the desk, and the boss says, "You're off to Europe." So I made about 6 trips to Europe that I remember, across the North Atlantic. The airplanes we had to go into Gander and refuel, and then jump the pond.
Okay.
And that wasn't bad, but that was nice too, because P&G was a wonderful company to work for.
Yes, yeah.
And I investigated them as much as they investigated me, I think. So I did that, and I lasted there for 29 years. And then they said 60, you're out. So 82, I was out. But now they let them go be a little bit beyond that. But unfortunately, they didn't do it when I was there. So I flew for Carl Linder and Cintas Corporation and some of the others that needed an extra pilot now and then. And they liked the idea I had a gray hair and experience.
Yeah. So you were kind of a independent contractor at that point, and just whenever they wanted people to call you? Or?
I didn't have a real signed contract, but we had a pre-scale. If you fly one day, it's $300. Fly 2 days, the next day is only $275 or something like that. I forget exactly what it was, but so it worked out pretty good. And then when they called me to be an instructor on that airplane to Kuwait, this English company had the crew, but the man in Kuwait bought the airplane. And so we flew him to Kuwait, and then the regular crew that I trained took over. And
was that for another corporation, was it? Or?
Yeah, well, it was a businessman. I don't know exactly what business he was in, but. And then they sent me home to put me on a TriStar to London. So I went to London, and they made an automatic landing. They invited me up in the cockpit because I had a uniform on, and they invited me up in the cockpit. So we made an automatic landing in London, and then they said, "You want to go home on a Concorde?" I said, "Well, sure, I want to go home on a Concorde. Yeah. You're paying for it." So they gave me a seat on the Concorde, and everybody got to look at the cabin, and then I got in, and the captain said, "Oh, sit down behind me." So I sat down behind him, and I was there for the rest of the flight.
Oh, boy.
And we landed at Kennedy, where I was sitting behind the captain there. And
that must have been a thrill.
That was an interesting flight, you know.
Yeah.
And
well, tell me about your family.
Family, well, I got married in April of '46, right after I got out of service. And we moved to Carbondale, Illinois, and didn't have any family there, of course. But my partner's family, that's where he's from. So he was happy, you know, weekends were nice with him, but I was flying on weekends. I had to work on weekends, you know. And so we had little problems there. My wife got sick one time. She ended up with bulbar polio, which made it kind of tough. But we had one boy born a year, just short of a year being married. And then and the doctor said, well, have another child and put her back in shape. We did another boy 2 years later. And then, then it got to the point where P&G needed a pilot temporarily. So I went for a week, and they liked the idea. I knew what I was doing, because I was flying single pilot, going in the New York area and all over by myself. Had to work the radios and fly the airplane too, So I got a little experience that way. And when I was in Carbondale, the Hayes boys were harness racers, and we flew them to the East Coast and go from one racetrack to the other as they raced their horses. And I got to see the inside of the horse race business there.
Oh boy!
So that part was interesting, so that B&G, I ended up flying for them in '82, my birthday. That was it. I was 60. That was out. But later on, at that time I was a government check pilot, licensed by the federal. And about a few months later, they said, the chief pilot of P&G needs a flight check. He can't get him somewhere. Can you do it? Yeah. For $300, I'll be glad to do it. Yeah. So I flew one of Proctor's airplanes after I retired. And they had a brand new manager from the factory. Knew nothing about airplanes. He says, I don't need to know anything about airplanes. I come here in this aviation department, they've got all the experts, So we stuck him on a jump seat in a jet. And I gave the chief pilot his check ride, and I did it by the book. We didn't do anything we weren't supposed to do. Did exactly by the book. But when I was running down the runway, we hit 160, and I yank one engine off, and this is the whole procedure. And you got to fly out on one engine.
Really?
And that's what they're designed to do, And so we did that. Then we got up and go, unusual attitudes are fun. You get into some unusual attitude, and he's got his eyes closed, and you say, it's yours. And you got to straighten it up, And he got the poor manager sitting on a jump seat, and then we were flying at different angles up there. To us, it's nothing, but he got down and he says, I'm kind of impressed with you guys.
Good job, huh? Good job.
Because we done all the emergency procedures,
Yeah. We have a few more minutes here. Do you want to do any backtracking, any stories that...
Well, I'm trying to think of the things I've forgotten, but mostly, as I said, there wasn't any Japanese fighters anywhere close to us that I knew of, except that one time, and there wasn't any there apparently. So actually, our biggest problem was weather, because the first time I'd ever been in a thunderstorm, when I was inside of many thunderstorms. But once you got done it once or twice, you know you got to keep the airspeed under control. Don't worry about your altitude, except for they don't get too low. But you had to keep your airspeed under control.
Was that a 24-hour operation, or were you flying most in the daytime?
And you went to bed, and all of a sudden somebody taps you, sir, you got a flight, sir, you got a flight. Somebody's tapping you on the shoulder, Okay. You get up and put on your clothes and get down and head for China. But with that extra flight, I took all through down to Singapore, or down to Shanghai, or Singapore rather, and all down fetching to China. And that was interesting to me, something different. But and we picked up a courier, another courier captain, I think he was, out of Washington. And he says, I got to go all the places you're going. Can I go with you? I said, sure, come along. And we got seats. So we did that. And we got down to Singapore. He said, we got a staff car tonight. I said, how'd you get that? I said, the motor pool officer's a friend of mine. So we got a staff car that night. He knew somebody everywhere. Yeah. He's a nice guy to have along, Yeah. Always getting his favors somewhere.
Was there a lot of celebrating when the Japanese surrendered? Was that
Well,
But you still did your job every day for quite a while there, it sounded like.
you didn't do much. You still had, next day we would take the same flight that's the economy as we did before, but
Yeah.
now it might be different cargo this time, you know, something that they wanted.
Okay, well.
But nothing, but as I said, when I got over into China for the first flight after the war ended, everybody's carrying a gun. Well, they weren't carrying them the last time I was here. Well, the communists are about to take over.
Yeah.
And they said, if we give you the signal, get that airplane out of here, because we don't want them to get a hold of it. But they didn't have any too much in Kunming and places we went.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then we got it all set up. We had a refueling stop at Luchao. We managed to get some trucks through there, so we had extra fuel and ferrying these trips, Chinese troops into Shanghai to occupy it. As I said, 60 Chinamen we can't talk to. The Japanese are still armed, you know.
Yeah. That Shanghai is quite a city. Quite a city.
And some of these guys got a little excited. I said, don't calm down. Don't start another war, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for telling us your story. It was very, very interesting. It sounded exciting.
But so...
How many hours, how many flying hours do you have?
Well, I'm a very poor record keeper, but I think about 25,000.
25,000. Wow.
That's only five. That's hours. That's only 50 hours a year for 50 years. And I did it for 50 years. I flew airplanes for 50 years, what I wanted to do as a kid.
Yeah.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world, you know, that I picked the right profession so that when I graduated with it, they needed it.
Yep.
And they gave me special training and so on.
Well, that was wonderful.
But I really, I was lucky that I happened to pick the profession beforehand that I wanted to do, and they needed me,
Yep.
and I was able to perform right
You loved
what they needed for.
Yep. Great.
So,
Well, thank you for your service.
well, one thing, I sat up there above the clouds when it was raining like hell underneath me, and I said, I don't have to hit the beaches.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Those poor guys that had to do that.
yeah.
But they're the heroes as far as I'm concerned. Me, I wasn't a hero. I was sitting up. If I didn't have something at my base, I flew someplace else and picked it up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there was a job to be done, and you were helping do it.
We had an airplane. Yeah. We could take an airplane and go down to Calcutta and get some more supplies.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a lot of different things that happened to us, but those are the mainly exciting things. But you just had to, you know, once you pull the wheels off from under that airplane and you fly, you're in charge. It's your responsibility for the whole thing. And when the engineer screws me up and doesn't tell me what's going on, then I'm in trouble. You got to tell me what's going on so I can make the decision.
Sound like sometimes you had too much fuel in the barrels and too little in the gas
Yeah,
tanks.
right, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, that's my general story.
Okay.
As I said,
I can tell you loved it. You loved
first
what
time
you
I
did.
told us to do a men's organization, period, and I didn't put, and it went through there. And the second time, I've got women in the audience. And I said, well, I better put a little romance in this thing.
Yeah.
So I told her about living with this, having this blind date with this beautiful brunette that came along. And then she sent me a Dear John letter when I was in training. But I ended up marrying.
Got her back.
And it happened at this particular meeting. They said, it's 9 o'clock, everybody has to go to work, I can't talk anymore. Well, I was only halfway through the talk. One lady calls up in the back, what happened? I said, I married the girl.
Yeah.
So that worked out pretty good.